Despite a slight lead in the polls, Kamala Harris has some serious obstacles that she's going to need to overcome in order to beat Donald Trump in November. Michael Malice was on the Tim Pool podcast and talked about why he thinks Kamala Harris won't win. It's really interesting. Take a look.
You think he's going to win?
I think Trump has in the bag. And here's my reasoning, because I think it's very important as far as possible to get your emotions out of political analysis, right? And for me, the best indicator of future behavior is past performance. In 2020, she had her honeymoon period. In her first debate, she came out, Biden, you're a racist. That little girl was me. Goes up in the polls. Tulsi comes along, not only does she have not a response on the stage, Officer Harris, but then when Anderson Cooper, hardly some kind of alt-right freak, is like, what happened to the debate? She goes, well, I'm a top-tier candidate, so... And it's like, what? That's your answer?
Respond to the question
and then she collapsed and was down to 1%,
laughed.
and she didn't even make it to Iowa. And here's the other thing. Let's suppose she is the perfect candidate and Trump is the worst candidate. I wouldn't wish on anyone to put together a presidential campaign in 100 days. That's not a thing. That's a nightmare.
Oh, right.
So I think he has in the bag.
So Michael is touching on something that I've talked about since before Kamala Harris even replaced Joe Biden, which is that her turnout is going to be historically low. And I'm saying historically based on past elections like 2016, not even 2020, because 2020, I think it'll be obviously historically low from 2020 because they changed all the rules. So there were a lot more people voting because of mail-in ballots. I think it will be obviously historically low from 2020, but I'm talking about even before those rules changed. 100 days, it might, so like he was saying, she has 100 days to run this campaign. 100 days might be enough for people who are super politically activated, which means the people who are already going to vote for her, maybe like a little bit of independence. But for the majority of people, it's just not enough time. It's literally 100 days is just not that much time to actually get your message out, to brand yourself enough. And this could be a massive mistake for Democrats because the polls are not, they show Kamala Harris a little bit ahead, but the problem that she has is that it's not even up to the popular vote. Well, you're seeing in the polls right now, she's up by maybe 3%, which that's in the popular vote, not the Electoral College. So 3% is really not very much. And then, of course, you consider the fact that polling always favors Democrats. And it's really not looking great for her in the polls. But again, assuming the polls are correct and assuming that they're bad for Donald Trump, polls only take into account who someone would vote for. Again, if you're voting today, this is the question, right? If you're voting today, are you voting for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? And you choose one. But it doesn't mean that you actually voted. It doesn't mean that you showed up to the polling booth, or if you have mail-in ballots in your states, it doesn't mean you actually took the time to fill out the ballot and do it. So imagine this scenario. In this scenario, there's a sizable amount of Americans who don't like Trump. There are even lots of Americans who are really dumb, they're stupid, and they think Kamala Harris would be better than Biden on most things. They're literally saying that she's going to fix the border, the economy, even though she's literally the vice president. Let's just say there's a huge group of Americans hate Trump. They're really stupid on that, and they've allowed the media to tell them these things and they believe them. Those people get their ballots mailed out to them and they just forget to fill them out. They forget. Or they have to go in person and they simply don't do it because they have work, they've got kids, they've got bad weather, emergencies, they're too hungry that day so they want to go to the restaurant instead of the booth. Any list of those things could keep them from voting, and I think that this is the scenario we're looking at. I'm talking about just people on the left / in the middle right now. A huge group of people who don't like Trump. I actually think that there's a lot of people, ton of stupid people who are going to buy into the media. Unfortunately, I really do believe that there are people like that. But does that mean that they're actually going to vote? I really don't think so because Kamala Harris really doesn't excite people that much. Juxtapose that now with a Trump voter. This voter in this scenario is pissed off at Biden. They want to buy a new house, but it costs literally 39% more than other houses. They know exactly who Trump is because he's been president or he's been running to be president for the last decade. Everyone knows who Donald Trump is. People don't really know who Kamala Harris is. If there's a freaking hurricane outside of their house, they're still going to go and vote for Donald Trump because people who are pissed about what's happening right now are pissed and they want to change. People who think Kamala Harris might make a change, they're not convinced that Kamala Harris is going to make a change. They're just like, oh yeah, and a pollster asks them who they're voting for, they say Kamala Harris. And so I am more and more convinced that Trump is going to have the enthusiasm on his side. And even though the polling might even be accurate, where the majority of Americans would vote for Kamala Harris, I don't think that people are excited by Kamala Harris. And I don't think that they're going to actually show up to vote when it comes down to it. I want to show you guys a different clip from the same podcast, though. Tim Walz is a freaky dude. Tim Pool and his guests were talking about it, and I thought the conversation got really interesting, so take a look at that video right here.
I am absolutely terrified of Tim Walz.
Yes.
What? I think she has, I'll tell you in a second. I don't think she has much positions one way or another. She was a conservative. She ran as like this law and order prosecutor in San Francisco, whatever, and now she's trying to avoid it. As I said many times, and no one here disagrees, that what happened during the lockdowns gave a lot of very evil people some very useful information about what people put up with government in terms of oppression. And they're cashing it in the UK right now. And if Tim Walz had his druthers, we would have that UK system in America today.
Has he done stuff in his state that indicates
he said explicitly that hate speech is not free speech.
Yeah.
So I'm extremely, and I also think he's a sociopath.
His wife said she opened the windows to smell the burning tires during the riots because it was like a symbol of the times, like history.
Signal. That was so
not a virtue signal. It's her.
She liked it.
Celebrating the rampage and the destruction because it suits her ideology.
From the governor's mansion.
So what they're saying here is actually, it points to an issue in messaging that Republicans have had for a long time. Many say that Kamala Harris is stupid. There's kind of that camp. And then there's another camp talking about how radical and kind of an evil genius is. And people on the left have kind of pointed that out and said, well, it can only be one. Is she stupid or is she an evil genius? The true answer is that she is stupid. She's a chameleon. She'll go with whatever's going on at the time. She really doesn't have hard liberal or progressive principles. Let's be totally honest about this. Deep down, yeah, does she kind of maybe feel liberal on certain issues? Yeah, but do we really think that Kamala Harris even really understands these issues? I don't think so. I think she does whatever is politically advantageous for her at the time. She's not very smart. I think she's got a few good people probably in her camp that have allowed her to win elections, but even those elections haven't been particularly difficult. So, yeah, I believe Kamala Harris is in the stupid camp. Tim Walz, on the other hand, is the scary one because I don't think he's stupid at all. I think he's very smart. I think he's very calculated. I think he is the ideologue that will drive their administration if they are elected. One thing that they didn't bring up in this video is that Tim Walz had a hotline created in Minnesota during COVID so that you could rat on your neighbor if they weren't, doing the right things during COVID, like wearing a mask in certain situations. There was literally a hotline set up, and then people would then call those people and educate them, as Tim Walz said, about COVID. This is like 1984 crap right now, where you're ratting on, it's in every dystopian novel ever. Some I agree with, some I don't agree with. Every single one, it all begins when you start ratting on your neighbors. That is what Tim Walz has done. And you know that that people don't believe that this is actually a popular thing to run on because they're running away from it. Tim Walz is proud of it because it is in line with his ideologies, but they haven't talked about it because clearly this freaks Americans out. If you think that he isn't a radical, then you do deserve what you get. If you think that's not radical and you're happy about that, you deserve to get Tim Walz, 100%. Get someone that takes all your rights away, takes all your liberties and privacy away. Yes, that's Tim Walz. The problem that the Harris campaign has, though, is that Tim Walz has never been shy about his radicalism. He has had scandal after scandal since being nominated as her VP. It's literally been a few weeks. There's been scandal after scandal. I don't know. You go through intense vetting to be the nominee, the second in command in the Democrat Party, essentially, and they still let him up there. They couldn't figure out all these things. He talked about having his kids through IVF. That was a lie. Stolen valor, talking about him fighting in combat. He never did that, except for, I guess, maybe if you consider the fact that he created a war zone in his state, you can consider maybe that he was part of a war zone, but he never went to Iraq and fought there like he told people he did. Again, they could have gone with Josh Shapiro, who is an incredibly popular governor from a state that Kamala Harris has to win. She has to win the state, pretty much, in order to win the presidency. But they didn't do it. And the reason why is because he's a Jew. He's a Jew, so you couldn't do it. So yeah, I'm actually pretty optimistic about Trump's chances because Harris is her own enemy. She and her staff know it too. And the reason why we know that they know it is because she hasn't had any interviews so far. She's about to have her first one, and that first one it's going to be pre-recorded on the friendliest network out there. And it's not just her. Tim Walz has to be there as well. And why? Because Tim Walz is the true ideologue. Kamala Harris will just say anything. And her staff knows this. Tim Walz knows this. That's why he has to go out there with her, because he's the one that's going to be actually pushing the policy, the agenda. She'll just say whatever, and people keep pointing out how much she's contradicting herself, which is not helping her at all. She can't even be somewhere alone because of how bad her decision-making skills are. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please go down below, comment, like, and subscribe, and watch another video.